They just don't care. They don't care. I'm tired of jumping into these debates and people having to say like, "Oh, no one knew about Joe Biden's cognitive decline," but also simultaneously everybody covered it.
One of the main arguments for the bad faith of the left is they covered up for Joe Biden's cognitive decline. If something is blatantly obvious in your face, how actually do you cover it up? By 2019, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, CNN, The Atlantic, the Associated Press, and Slate all published articles on Biden's age and fitness for office. What is the response by someone like Rob Noerr to this fact? Does he deny that these articles were in fact written?
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care that the Democrats that were for locking up Trump are now furious that they think that it's beyond the pale to lock up a judge. Lock up more. I won't be satisfied. Lock up Nancy Pelosi. Lock up Joe Biden.
On what, right? On what? So now he's outright saying that do it based on the precedent set by the Democrats. So now he's openly advocating for going after political rivals based on garbage. His words, garbage.
That's the standard.
That's the standard based on the standard. The garbage standard, right? He is in favor of it. And he's saying it's not a hypothetical. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Everything is like this. When you just take a little slice of it, the analysis of it, everything completely falls apart. And that comes even on the topics he wants to discuss, the topics he likes to discuss, like Kevin Klein-Smith, like all the Russiagate stuff. The truth is, he feels more comfortable on those grounds, even though I crush him every single time we have these debates. Hey, folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. I also want to chat about some major copium from our friend Robert Noerr. He put up a video that I saw, and not all of it is addressed to me. It's kind of just like a general video reaction, or not reaction stream, like he giving his thoughts stream. And I just want to like address some of what he's saying and show you how much of like how weak it is, right? What a weak position it is, in fact. And so I wanted to do that with you guys, to take you through and respond and react to some of the stuff that our good friend Robert is talking about. And I just want to introduce to you a level of copium, a level of fear, and just repetition that isn't worthy of the self-proclaimed best debater on the right wing.
I'm tired of pretending that these Democrats are good faith about this. They're not. They just don't care. They don't care. I'm tired of jumping into these debates and people having to say like, "Oh, no one knew about Joe Biden's cognitive decline," but also simultaneously everybody covered it. There was no.
So I want to like address two things right there. You guys don't have a lot of context, but basically he's doing his "I'm tired" rant. I'm just tired of it, man. I'm actually going to start a little back before so you guys can hear like the full throatedness of it. It's this constant whining, boring victim mentality. Okay? So that's number one. People who say, "I'm tired of it. I'm just so tired of it." And with him, it's constant whining, boring, just blah, blah, blah. And it's a way to turn every single debate into a discussion about the underlying character of the people that he's debating with. Imagine if I did that, by the way. Imagine if I started these conversations with like Tim Pool and all these other people, or even like Good Logic, saying, "Hey, you're a bad faith piece of shit, da, 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 da." Okay? There can be time to point out inconsistencies and flaws, but when all you do is, not to say that you can't contest it on the merits, you absolutely can, and I think his case is weak as hell, especially with respect to me. But when all you do as part of your shtick is, "These guys are bad faith hack pieces of shit, I don't know them anything," it just gets boring. Address the actual topic. And then the second thing about the cognitive decline, which we'll address. So I'm just backing it up real quick, and I'm going to put the sound up.
I just don't care anymore, any of the Democrats' criticism. I don't.
So he wants his topic to be, why should we care what you guys think, right? Why should we care what you guys think? Because you guys are hypocrites. That's what he wants the topic to be. Not, this Trump administration is the best thing ever. Not, I want to defend all the Trump policies and what Trump's doing. Not, Trump is actually wiping out the corruption. Trump is being effective as a president. it's you guys, no one should take you seriously. And it's always that with him.
And so that's the topic. We should ridicule and make fun of Democrats and media people that are now criticizing Trump.
We should ridicule you guys. That's the topic. Should we or should we not ridicule you guys? And what that allows him to do is to do these kinds of ritual conversations. These ritual conversations. This Kleinsmith discussion that I had with him most recently must have been like the, 8th iteration of that discussion that we've had. I've actually, I don't think I've ever had a January 6th insurrection debate with Rob. He claims that he has had it with me. But he said, I'm tired of debating January 6th. Just tired of it. I don't actually think we've had a debate on January 6th as an insurrection. If there's video of it, I don't know where it is. We might have had some private discussions, but not one that's been moderated on an actual formal debate. How many discussions have we had specifically about Kevin Kleinsmith and the Carter Page warrants? How many times?
Don't care. It's not to say that there's no criticism of Trump. I certainly make many criticisms myself. And I'm willing to hear criticisms from people who I think are on the up and up.
What he's saying is, I'm willing to hear criticisms of people from Trump if you buy into my framework of the whole system is corrupt against Trump. If you don't buy my whole thing, by his whole thing of everything was tilted against Trump, and there was a conspiracy within the deep state to go get after Trump for political reasons. If you don't buy that position, you are by definition not coming into it with good faith, and so I don't need to give you the time of day. That's what he's saying. Just realize that. If that were true, by the way, of conservative influencers and the MAGA media cultists, that they were inconsistent on something and we thought they were disingenuous, Jesus, we just never have debates publicly with Trumpers who pretend to care about, there's even on the basic stuff, right? Apparently it's not patriotic to complain about prices anymore. You can't even complain about prices anymore or you're a traitor. Whereas before it was super duper important to always complain about prices. Now it's you can't even complain about prices. So talk about disingenuity in terms, or how genuine you are with respect to even just basic components of the economy. And people complaining about stuff. Look at, for example, Benny Johnson, who's, he's tweeting, Kamala crash, oh my God, the stock market. And then when it's Trump, it's guys, what is money anyway? Just things, stuff. If you lose money, who cares? It's probably better. So spare me on the, I don't owe anything to, I guess at bottom, you don't know anything to anybody. If you don't want to have conversations, don't have them. But this whinging, it's just the left-wingers. They're just way more inconsistent, or they don't agree with all my bullshit narratives. And so by definition, they're bad faith. And so they supported the corruption, right? One thing is to say, I actively support corruption. The other thing is to say, I have a principled stance that maybe is a little bit more nuanced, that this wasn't what you're painting it out to be, that your narrative that they're just after Trump and that it was a political hit job is garbage. Remember, in the course of our conversation, he said James Comey should be hanged for treason. He defined treason as going against the government. You know what? Why don't we actually pull up his definition of treason? I don't want to misquote him after all. This is what he said. He said that James Comey ought to be hanged for treason. And again, I want to make sure that I'm not misquoting him. And so I actually am going to go right in this moment. You're going to have to wait for me to make sure that I'm quoting him verbatim. So I'm going to do that right now. So please let me cook. So this is what happened. I said, what would it show you to show that the procedures under FISA are working correctly? And this is what he says. But what evidence would it take to convince you otherwise from your position?
Prison for James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page.
So it would literally take, for what crimes actually?
Maybe hang them for treason publicly.
Maybe hang them for treason publicly. For who? James Comey, Peter Strzok, and Lisa Page. For treason. Okay? For treason? So what's the definition of treason?
What?
I didn't think you were going to ask me that, bro.
I don't have the legal definition.
I don't have the legal definition. All right. So what did you mean by it when you said treason, right? What did you mean by it? And look at he tries to slide that by, right? Look at how sly he tries to be. Look at this. What's the definition of treason?
I don't have the legal definition in front of me, but treason to me. Go ahead. You know the legal definition.
Yeah, he tries to put it on me, right? Well, you said it. Look at how sly that is, right? A lesser. Okay, this is where I'm going to pat myself on the back. A lesser interlocutor would have bit the bullet right then. No, you said something. What did you mean by it when you said it?
I don't have the legal definition in front of me, but treason to me. Go ahead. You know the legal definition.
Well, no, I'm asking you. Surely you meant something by it when you said it. Surely you meant something by it when you said it.
You don't know. Treason to me.
You don't know. So he is struggling, stammering. Treason to me means he's just making it up on the spot. He's making it up on the spot. You're making it up again, Arnold. You're making it up. And you guys know that song, right? He's winging it.
Attacking the country, including the legitimate leaders of them, trying to subvert them.
Wait,
attacking
what
the legitimate
So, what? So let's just make sure we get that definition of treason from him. Think about when you said it.
You don't know. Treason to me means attacking the
legitimate country,
including the legitimate leaders of them,
attacking the country, including the legitimate leaders of them,
to subvert them,
including trying to subvert them. So even just like imagine that, right? Attacking the country, including the legitimate leaders of them. Okay, at the time the FISA warrants are issued, Carter Page is a water boy advisor to the Trump campaign, right? So in no sense, when the initial warrants are authorized, when the course of conduct is started, can you say that the legitimate leader of the country is Donald Trump? So clearly you're going to excise any pre-Trump being president conduct. Just in terms of the mere fact pattern of his statutory definition here for treason. Or I guess whatever terminology definition that he wants, his, I don't know, common sense definition, right? So just keep that in mind real quick. And then he's going to narrow it a little bit more because he realizes it's like, oh, what?
Attacking the country, including the legitimate leaders of them, trying to subvert them.
Oh, so what does attacking mean, right? So like attacking, like going against the White House, or sorry, the Congress, and attacking the Congress building and the Capitol building? Attacking the legitimate leaders. So are you saying that the Jan Sixers would be committing treason? You get me? So his definition of treason now seems to encompass the Jan Sixers. You think he even thought about that for a second? Let's keep going. Trying to subvert the leader is what you take. Yeah, so this is me like, okay, super broad. Treason to be.
The country in general. The leader would be part of that.
Okay, so what? Trying to subvert the country.
Okay, that's not actually a good.
So that's actually not a good definition. All right, so we've abandoned that. The first thing you said, not good. Okay, cool.
You could do so in a legal means.
Trying to subvert the leader, the country, including the leader, in illegal means. Trying to subvert in illegal means. Trying to subvert the leader in illegal means.
Correct.
So, correct. He says correct. Trying to subvert the leader in illegal means. I think by that logic, any leaker would be committing treason, right?
Sure.
Wow. Pretty big bullet to bite there, buddy. Any leaker is a treason person. Okay. You really thought about that? Okay, you don't think treason means that, right?
Why not?
Why not?
The punishment for treason is only up to death. It doesn't mean that that's all.
Because no one uses it that way, number one. So why don't you think that term means that? Well, the usage of that term isn't used that way. It's not the legal definition. And usually so I'm ready for it. He doesn't think that I know the definition of treason.
Go ahead.
Usually it means levying war. I'm literally quoting scholarly research on the term treason that I'm familiar with. So I'm not winging it. I know because I've done all this debates on insurrection and treason. So there are multiple different versions of treason that were recognized under the common law. The first is levying war. Levying war, which is also coextensive with some definitions of, by the way, insurrection, or it means giving aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States, which is a term of art meant to refer to foreign enemies, foreign adversaries. And then it could be like if you're so then there's the two definitions that are left, either giving aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States, the foreign countries, or levying war. And in which case, leaking documents specifically to a foreign country that which were, for the purpose of betraying one country, that would be treason. And so then you've properly limited it into its historical and legal context. And so, but think about it. He's just completely winging it, right? He's completely winging it. And if you don't think that, by the way, even the facts here, even the facts with respect to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page on his own definition are bizarre to say that those would equate to treason. But it is so broad, right? That's what he was arguing me with respect to insurrection, that, oh, your definition of insurrection is so broad. His definition of treason is broader than any definition of insurrection I've ever heard. But anyway, just go back to this point, right? So watch.
Many criticisms myself. And I'm willing to hear criticisms from people who I think are on the up and up. But I'm tired of pretending that these Democrats are good faith about this. They're not.
So what is good faith is being specific, understanding the terms you're using before you apply them. But what he wants to say is he's preemptively considered anyone who doesn't buy his notion that people like James Comey need to be put to death for treason are inherently bad faith.
They just don't care. They don't care. I'm tired of jumping into these debates and people having to say like, "Oh, no one knew about Joe Biden's cognitive decline," but also simultaneously everybody covered it. There was no.
And so now we get into like the Joe Biden cognitive decline argument, right? This is one of his main arguments for the bad faith of the left, isn't it? One of the main arguments for the bad faith of the left is they covered up for Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And he's pointing out an apparent contradiction in his mind, which is, on the one hand, everyone did cover it, but it was also not obvious. Well, assuming that is a contradiction, it applies to you as well. You're saying it was so obvious that he was cognitively impaired, but at the same time, they covered it up, right? And so think about how that works, actually. If something is blatantly obvious in your face, how actually do you cover it up? Right? How do you cover up if someone is taking a poop out in the middle of the street and there's a video of the guy taking the poop on the street and it's just visibly apparent for everyone to see and it's in the news? How are you proposing that it be covered up? How are you proposing that it be covered up? Aren't you a victim of that controversy? Unless you take the position that, hey, maybe there are shades of gray here in terms of what are the exact examples of cognitive decline of Joe Biden that was publicly available and what was not. But in order to proceed with his narrative, Rob does this thing, this gestalt, this kind of feeling thing. And it's the same thing he does, by the way, in the context of FISA. And I'll explain a little bit about that later. He molds together different things and to make it as to one sort of cohesive whole. So there are instances, specific examples of Joe Biden's cognitive decline that in fact were covered up in the sense of they were not publicly disclosed and they were not covered by the media, therefore not covered by the media. Example 1, George Clooney's interaction with Joe Biden was not covered by the media because George Clooney did not come out with it until after the debate, even though that interaction occurred before the debate. Okay. Other instances, right? The exact scope of the really close insiders. Yeah, they didn't publicize all the horrible shit that was happening with Joe Biden, in the sense that he was kind of really, really, really hands off on a lot of stuff. And these different timetables, they didn't disclose that to the public. If you want to call that a cover up, go ahead. I mean, that standard then for cover up would apply to so much stuff that the Trump administration does or tries to cover up, just to be clear, is, agencies not disclosing their communications and interactions with the president of the United States. In fact, Donald Trump is in court often arguing that the people who have access and knowledge of those interactions are not allowed to disclose them. So you can take the position that failure to disclose a bad interaction by an employee of Joe Biden constitutes a cover-up. Perhaps you think there's like a greater duty to the country in that context, but just be aware of like what standards you're applying to Trump and what efforts Trump has done and gone through to prevent access by the general public to certain amounts of information regarding his ties and connections. trying to prevent disclosure of certain stuff that was uncovered by the January 6th committee, the special counsel reports for volumes 1 and 2 of Jack Smith's investigation, to say nothing about what was going on with the perfect call and his cover-up with that. So if you want to call it a cover-up anytime there is a lack of disclosure from the executive branch on presidential, interactions, call it a cover-up. What you can't say is that you can prove that the media is in on those, or that generally, right, just because those specific instances, those specific pattern and practices weren't disclosed, that Biden's age was not talked about, right? That what it would take to be good faith in this instance, when you're talking about the quote unquote cover up, is to actually differentiate what we're talking about here. No thinking sane person could say that the media, that Democrats, that Republicans never talked about Biden's age. I'm about to go through the Wikipedia page of concerns regarding Biden's cognitive and mental health and tell you, show you the extent of gaslighting that Rob is trying to exercise on you when he goes through this canned narrative that he's created for himself. But before I do that, I want you to realize the shadiness here. He is combining acts of, arguable cover-ups, that is, specific interactions, specific practices, specific patterns from people close to Biden, and combine that with overall coverage by the media and even efforts by people like me, okay? So what he's trying to do is apply this cover-up to the media and to me and to people like Econoboy and others. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to paint you a gaslighting, fake, debunked narrative that somehow we are in some grand conspiracy. So why don't we go to the Wikipedia page, and we're going to read this whole thing. Joe Biden was 78 years, 61 days of age when he took office as president of the United States on X date. At the time, he became the oldest person to be inaugurated president and the oldest sitting president. While Biden campaigned for re-election in 2024, he suspended his campaign after receiving pressure to step aside due to electability concerns arising from his age and health. Before and during Biden's presidency, American voters and then former President Donald Trump expressed concerns about Biden's health and fitness for office. So here's something that you need to be clear on, right? If it's the case that something approaching 80% of Democrats do believe that Biden is too old to be the president, in what sense was there a cover-up of Biden's cognitive decline? You get me? If everyone knows the essential truth, which is that Biden has cognitive decline and he's probably incredibly old and in fact too old, right? In what sense was there? Now, there could still be a specific cover-up of specific actions, specific patterns, specific practices. That's not inconsistent. But this narrative that you were trying to cast this false light over the American people, that he wasn't old. At the bare minimum, you can't say that there wasn't widespread comprehension and discussion. And we'll get into the specific facts here about Biden's cognitive decline. And we'll get into the background, okay? These concerns, right, led U.S. Representative Dean Phillips to launch a primary challenge in the 2024 presidential elections. You guys remember, okay? Dean Phillips said he was too old. Cenk Uygur said he was too old. People talked about his age. And by the way, as we'll talk about in 2020, people talked about it in 2022. In a February 2024 report, prosecutor Robert Hur opined that Biden's memory had significant limitation, which the White House dismissed the report as a partisan hit job. Guys, the Hur report was major news. Do you remember when in the mainstream media, post Hur report, the attacks that were made, the coverage of the Hur report? Ultimately, it was swallowed in the craziness that was that entire election campaign. I'll admit that for sure. But there were deep concerns about Biden's cognitive health at that incident. that were talked about, that were discussed. Democrats themselves were complaining and sussing it out and arguing about it. These were aired. They intensified after a poor performance by Biden in a debate, leading to people to call for him to drop out. Then he dropped out. In 2018, when Biden was considering running for president, he consulted with friends, aides, and longtime supporters as to whether he was too old to seek the presidency. By 2019, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, CNN, The Atlantic, the Associated Press, and Slate all published articles on Biden's age and fitness for office in 2019. So stop there, right? What is the response to this fact? What is the response by someone like Rob Noerr to this fact? Does he deny that these articles were in fact written? Does he deny that these existed? That these mainstream media publications, these quote left-wing publications, they did not in fact cover it in 2009? This feels a bit post hoc, to be honest. I don't remember anyone caring about these articles, right? The question isn't whether or not you care about articles, all right? Whether or not someone cares about articles isn't the question. The question is, was there a cover up? Very specifically, right? We are not talking about whether someone cares. We just aren't. It's completely irrelevant. What we're talking about is, was there a cover up? Was there an intentional cover up by the media of Biden's cognitive health? That's the question. It's very different to the question of did people care? But of course, people did care about his age, regardless of whether or not they cared about those articles. People cared about his age. I know because I was one of them. I know because at the time I was in a study group in law school where we were looking over the various different results in the caucuses, primaries. I remember telling all my friends, yeah, Biden's too old. Biden's too old. Biden's too old. I didn't want Biden to win the 2020 primary. So people did care. You can talk about the topic in such a way that it downplays the story's significance. You have to make that case, right? So someone would have to make the case that these stories are downplaying it, right? That these stories that's someone's case to make. The fact that these publications are publishing such stories shows at a minimum they felt that it was newsworthy. There at a bare minimum is evidence that people were able to comprehend and appreciate and agree that he appeared to be too old and that they had concerns about his age. And it's someone's case to make that these specific articles did in fact downplay a story's significance. It is logically possible that a story downplay the significance of it. But that is a case that the person affirming the argument of cover-up needs to provide and explain and go through and say, this New York Times article, yeah, it was published in 2019, but you notice, it doesn't really get to the whatever. Also keep in mind that Biden's cognitive health changed over time. Biden's cognitive health was diminished in 2024 versus where it was in 2019. You can tell based on your eyes. Compare the debate in 2020 to the debate in 2024. And so the nature of the alleged cover-up needs to be examined at the critical moments in time. But as far back as 2019, at the bare minimum, there are articles by mainstream publications reporting on this, not covering it up. That year, in advance of the 2020 presidential election, some Democratic candidates for president attempted to use his age against him. I remember this because I was one of them. I wasn't a candidate, but I was someone who said, I remember being at home. I remember watching the last debate with Bernie Sanders and Biden, commenting to my family, Biden answers suck. I thought Bernie was winning this debate, even though Bernie is technically older. I remember saying he's too old. Biden's too old. Right? So I remember it. And I remember Biden being like, this is ageist. I remember this. Before and during Biden's 2020 presidential campaign, Biden was followed by rumors that he had undergone plastic surgery to appear younger. The facelift In April 2019, Biden announced his entry into the primary. Throughout the primary, other Democratic candidates, primary voters, and journalists raised concerns surrounding Biden's age and mental acuity, viewing this as a potential detriment to his electability. Yeah. Did you guys sleep through the 2020 Democratic primary? Did you sleep through it? Do you remember everyone talking about it in 2020? All the Democratic candidates, them pointing to the gaffes, laughing at them. Some of the age-related concerns were easily dismissed as his main opponent was Bernie Sanders, making him older than Biden. I also remember that dynamic and having to try to justify that to certain Biden voters in my life. Nevertheless, Biden faced age-based criticism due to his lackluster debate performances and frequent gaffes. Guys, the gaffes were incredibly common all the time. In a memorable September 2019 debate, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Julian Castro accused him of forgetting something he had said minutes earlier. At a March 2nd, 2020 campaign event, Biden unsuccessfully attempted to quote from the Declaration of Independence, saying, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, all men and women created by, you know the thing." At the other points during his 2020 presidential campaign, Biden mistakenly stated that he was running for U.S. Senate. During the general election campaign, Biden again faced age and acuity-related criticism and was consistently attacked by his Republican opponent, Donald Trump, on those issues. All the Republicans were talking about it. The Republicans constantly on the loudest mainstream news forum that there is, Fox News, constantly for his lack of public appearances as well, hiding in the basement. He would often react to Biden's gas by making unproven claims that he was suffering from dementia. Dementia Joe, right? These were so well known. They called him Sleepy Joe. Where do you think Sleepy Joe comes from? What do you think Sleepy Joe's about? During Biden's presidency, Trump and right-wing media outlets continued to make claims of dementia and cognitive decline constantly. The Biden administration routinely aimed to make light of the president. I agree. They absolutely did this, joking about it in a manner similar to the way Ronald Reagan responded to age-related concerns. When used by the Biden administration, this approach was met with both praise and mockery. The Biden administration was criticized for allegedly gaslighting or harassing journalists who asked questions about Biden's health or age. And they were asked. They absolutely were asked. Various events occurred during Biden's presidency, highlighting concerns about his age and health. When he walked upstairs and stumbled, a spokesperson, right? Like the government propaganda outlet, of course, they're always going to spin their spinsters. Biden appeared to fall asleep at a summit, just like Trump did. The incident went viral. Political report on a recent poll showing the voters had increasing doubts about the health and mental fitness of the President Joe Biden. So more doubts were increasing. 48%, right, thought that he was mentally unfit. That's a lot of people. The report noted the voters' perception of Biden's physical and mental health had shifted dramatically since late 2020. So this story was coming out. People were seeing it. At the 2022 White House Easter egg roll, Biden was directed away from the media by a White House staffer dressed as the Easter Bunny. Video of the Easter Bunny incident went viral. Remember this? It was viewed more than 5 million times. Why is the Easter Bunny directing the President of the United States? Republican Senator Josh Hawley, press secretary. It was all they talked about. Biden fell off his bike. I remember that. In the summer of 2022, a New York Times Siena College poll found that 61% of Democratic voters wanted someone other than Biden to be the nominee, citing his age as the main concern. Yes, it's true, right? Biden's aides dismissed age-related concerns as politically motivated attacks by Republicans, right? The media was asking questions about it. The media was polling it as early as 2022. James Carville, Ezra Klein, The Economist, said Biden should not seek re-election. These are major Democratic figures, intelligentsia, right? Is Ezra Klein covering up Biden's mental acuity? At no point was he. Is James Carville covering up cognitive decline? Is The Economist covering up the decline? Seriously. Biden read instructions from his teleprompter out loud. Dean Phillips became the first incumbent Democratic member of Congress to say that Biden should not run for election. He called for generational change, citing Biden's age. He had this gaffe where he was asking whether someone who died was in the audience. This is all in 2022. He said that he had campaigned in 54 states in support of the Affordable Care Act. These are all instances where issues were raised, both in the news media, right? I'm sure these are articles, and also on social media. In 2023, DNC committee officials reportedly staged hush-hush talks to plan for contingencies in the event of the withdrawal from the 2024 election. And then he announced that he would seek re-election. Then he tripped and fell. God save the Queen, man. At a September 2023 press conference in Vietnam, Biden said, "I don't know about you, but I'm going to bed." Moments later, they interrupted a rambling Biden and declared the press conference was over. The incident raised questions about Biden's fitness. A CNN poll in 2023 found that more than half of Democrats, nearly 3/4 of Americans, said they were, quote, seriously concerned for Biden's physical and mental competence. Does this sound like a story that's being covered up on the level of his overall fitness for office? Again, I want to stress, and I've stressed it now multiple times, there are specific incidents like these hush-hush talks, right? Or the specific stuff that we found out after, which I referenced at the start of this little diatribe, where that absolutely could have been covered up. But the main story, when 73% of the country has serious concerns for physical and mental competence of Joe Biden, it's not something that's not being covered. You can't make that argument. Dean Phillips launched his campaign. In public, he was ridiculed. So yeah, Democrats rallied around the flag and ridiculed Dean Phillips and supported their nominee. No different, by the way, than what Trump and the Republicans do with Trump. Sorry, what the Trump Republicans do with their dear leader. They rallied around the flag. It was a bad thing to do. Was it a media cover-up? No. In October 2023, Mike Johnson was asked whether he believed Biden was experiencing cognitive decline. Johnson answered, I do. I think most of us do. That's reality. It's not a personal slight to him. It has nothing to do with his age and acumen. Everyone's different. Everyone ages differently. Clearly, you see a difference. On his 81st birthday, he said it was his 146th. People were very, very concerned. This doctor gave him a nearly 75% chance of living through a second term based on publicly available information. Dean Phillips said it would be impossible for him to be president for 4 more years. The Hill published a report in January 2024. Watch Biden mumbles. This is The Hill, right? Biden mumbles incoherently during the speech at brewery. 74% say Joe is too old. Does that sound like they're covering up Biden's mental decline? When The Hill is publishing a report that says and draws attention to the overwhelming sentiment of the American people that Biden was too old? Does that sound like it's a cover-up? Then comes the Robert Hur, when once again, this was brought up at the worst possible time. Why? Because people were talking about his age, whether he was up for it, whether he was up for 4 years. And yeah, they defended themselves in ways that were not justified. No one's saying that the Biden administration is guiltless or that there wasn't a cover-up from the Biden administration. Liberal commentators, Democrats, officials accused her of partisanship. I did not, right? Famously, I did not. I said that Hur was being blasted unfairly when I reviewed the Hur report. I said it was important to include the stuff about mental acuity if it played any role. I argued with people that it was important. I admonished people in my orbit who didn't read the Hur report, didn't know what was in it, didn't pay it any mind. I said they should read the Hur report. I said so many times. So where am I covering up the mental health problems of Joe Biden? Senator Rick Scott called for Biden to be removed from the presidency via the 25th Amendment. The Republican-led House Judiciary Committee issued subpoenas for the full audio recordings of Biden's interviews with Robert Hur. That was a big kerfuffle for like 4 or 5 days. Should they give over the recording? Should they not? In a February 2024 poll, Biden's age and health were major or moderate concerns for 86% of voters. According to another poll, most voters who voted for Biden, most Biden voters said he was too old to be an effective president. These concerns cut across generation, gender, race, and education. On June 2024, Biden's performance raised concern about his age. He confused Putin with Xi Jinping, and then the debate happened. So what are we talking about here? So think about what you have to think to believe Rob in this moment, right? So look at this.
They're not. They make many criticisms myself, and I'm willing to hear criticisms from people who I think are on the up and up. But I'm tired of pretending that these Democrats are good faith about this. They're not. They just don't care. They don't care. I'm tired of jumping into these debates and people having to say like, "Oh, no one knew about Joe Biden's cognitive decline."
Who says no one knew about or had concerns about Joe Biden's decline? Who says it? Name the person who says that. Name him.
But also simultaneously, everybody covered it. There was no.
The truth is, they covered it. That's the truth. The truth is, yeah, the media covered it. What I just presented to you was evidence that the media covered it. Now, if you want to go and be a little bit more nuanced and say, well, their coverage downplayed it, that's your case to make. That's your case to make.
No cover up. None. I don't know what to say. I'm tired of having to go back and look at the receipt. Lockdowns. What lockdowns? We don't remember those during the pandemic. What lockdowns? I don't recall that. What am I supposed to do? Go back? Is that it?
Yeah, go back and find the people that you're saying covered up for the mental decline. And on some people, maybe we can agree, but on some people, we're not going to agree, or some institutions. So with respect to, if what you mean by cover up is did not disclose when they had a duty to disclose, that's going to be even harder, right? So you could argue like the media, the reason why he has to go on the media is this is not a standard that would be applied to like any Republican ever. It's a standard that's applied to people who have a duty to report it, right? And we would think of the media as being in that category. So that's where that comes in, right? It's a much harder case to be like, yeah, Biden's own employees didn't release damaging information about Biden. Okay, I'm sure that they have a lot of information they didn't release about Trump, okay?
Or about, I saw Black Elk, by the way, absolutely crushing it with the editing. Wow, you support locking up judges? Seriously? Yeah, we'll talk about that, HN. Yeah. These people are not good faith. Hey, HN, did you support the cases against Trump? Did you support Trump getting arrested and his mugshot? A simple yes or no will suffice. Nobody's.
And then the notion that like cases can't be different, right? So he accuses people of being beholden to a double standard. Well, if you supported Trump arrest, then you can't support, or then you have to also support the judge arrest. When Rob is guilty of that same double standard, if that's what we're doing, in that he doesn't support the Trump arrest, but he does support the judge arrest. So presumably there's some substantive disagreement on which one is justified or not.
Isn't that correct, HN? Isn't that correct, Democrats? No one's above the law, right?
Also, a slight addendum, not that it matters. I do think that judges are able to do criminal acts and be held accountable for 100%. But actually, Trump was not a sitting president when he was arrested. And it is the position of the Justice Department that a sitting president is not amenable to arrest. So in that sense, the president has more protection. Certainly this president, who's already doing criminal things, the president is having more protections than these judges. Trump, at the time of his arrest and prosecution, was not any government official, to be clear. But even if you were, you're guilty of that yourself, unless you're going to say one was justified, the other wasn't, which is, I think, what most people are suggesting. Not that judges are immune to doing crime, but they think that the circumstances here aren't criminal, and that the arrest of the judge, now I have not come to this conclusion, but that the arrest of the judge is purely pretextual and baseless. Not that judges can do anything they want and not be subject to criminal law. And so that's kind of like a misrepresentation of the positions of a lot of these people.
Yeah, Andrew's a great guy. Andrew's doing a debate live tonight. I saw he's getting protested by Antifa, so you know you're doing things right. The list goes on and on of things that we have to claim Democrats pretend to care about. I thought it would start a dangerous trend. We have to pretend Democrats care about, only to when their side does it, they're like, oh, well. No, I did not support prosecuting Trump. Yes, once the standard was set that we could prosecute the candidate for president on the other side for any sort of garbage. Yes, I'm absolutely for our side doing that over and over and over. I think that.
Oh, okay. So this is the true deceit that what Rob is trying to do, right? So Rob claims that once the standard is set, I'm in favor of applying the standard as against the Democrats. Now, peel back the curtain here and always question whether, quote unquote, the standard has been set. This is often brought about in the context of the FISA discussions, where he'll say something like, oh, well, you were okay. You were fine with illegal or unwarranted FISA warrants being applied to members of Trump's campaign, so the standard has been set. But then you say, hold on, Rob. I disagree with that. That was wrong to do. And so when you say that, well, there are two problems, but the first one I'll identify, which is once you say that, all you can say is you're lying. You didn't care. Back then, you didn't say anything back then, which is a complete lie and bullshit, right? Because there was contemporaneous discussion that you can even go back to when I had these discussions openly, when the reports were released that contained the information about it, right? We didn't know about the procedural defects in the FISA warrants until there were reports released after the FISA surveillance had already occurred. And once those reports were released, there were discussions, including by me, of them. And so again, more gaslighting. We're supposed to comment on the problems with the FISA process on Carter Page's warrants before there's a fucking investigation into the FISA warrant process? Does that make any sense? So we're supposed to, in 2016, when the warrants are secretly being authorized by the FISA court using a secret process and being executed in a secret way, we're supposed to call them out for deficiencies in the FISA obtaining process. No? Well, then what do you mean by calling them out at the moment, right? I call them out when I see the report and it says, oh yeah, there were problems. This was done. It was improper. And there's maybe even some criminal stuff. I say, oh yeah, that's bad. And he has no retort to that. He just says, oh, you're lying. If you thought it was bad, why didn't you call it out at the time? Well, I called it out when the report was released. I read the executive summary and I say, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's wrong. And so what sense is that not calling it out in real time? I couldn't call it out before I knew that it was against the process or that it did not have sufficient probable cause, probably. Do you get what I'm saying here?
They should lock up hundreds of judges and policy officials. Anyone who tries to intervene any way whatsoever to stop ICE from doing their job, I hope they all get the maximum sentence, and I hope that they are dog-walked.
Oh, yes, that's what we're doing. So notice, Robert Noerr is saying that the standard has been set, okay? The standard has been set. And so I want the standard to be followed. Yet, when I say something to the effect of, well, I don't want the standard to be, in the case of FISA, doing illegal, unauthorized FISA warrants. Okay? He has to say, oh, you're lying. You actually do want that to be the standard. But now he he tries to do this little demur where he's like, I don't have to answer the question when it's put to me, which is like, would I support using warrant or like defective FISAs against Democrats? I don't have to answer that if you ask me it. It's just a little non sequitur about I don't deserve or I don't have the requirement to answer to you kind of thing, which is just, it's lame and it's not on topic. But here he's saying, well, the standard has been set and we should follow the standard. So if it were the case that endless lawfare were bad, assuming that it were endless bad faith lawfare, it sounds like what Rob is suggesting is actually do that. I'm actually in support of bad faith lawfare against judges since it was done against Trump. So it seems like Rob, under his own standards, is as guilty as the double standard that he points out to others as anyone else. It's very clear right here. He's suggesting, yes, I do want this. I just want to make so no one can say that I'm taking him out of context. He is saying, I want this because the standard has been set. And so why wouldn't you also be in favor of defective FISA warrants if you're in favor of the comparison being sort of a defective lawfare campaign against a former public official?
And their side does it. They're like, oh, well.
So just to make sure I'm not misrepresenting him, I'm not, just to be clear what he's saying.
No, I did not support prosecuting Trump. Yes, once the standard was set that we could prosecute the candidate for president on the other side for any sort of garbage. Yes,
So listen to what he's saying, right? Once the standard has been set that we can prosecute someone for any garbage means something that is not real. It's a fugazi, it's a fuzi, it's a wazi. Now I'm in favor of applying that standard to judges. You guys see that? So he's saying once the standard has been set, I'm in favor of it, right? So here it is. Ready?
Only to when their side does it, they're like, oh, well.
Ready? So he's going to say it's garbage, right?
No, I did not support prosecuting Trump. Yes, once the standard was set that we could prosecute the candidate for president on the other side for any sort of garbage. Yes, I'm absolutely for our side doing that over and over and over.
So I'm in favor of our side going after political, now this judge, right? It's a judge, but going after enemies for garbage. So he's actually in favor of that, right? So what the response would be is Trump was actually guilty. He did crimes. Not that we're okay with going after him for garbage. No one says, yeah, except, well, maybe some people, but no one mainstream says we should go after Trump for garbage. They say, no, these cases were not garbage. But he's saying once we've set that standard, we should go after someone for garbage. But if you're saying, well, we're not going after the judges for garbage, then the standard is go after people for the genuine thing. So then we're just disagreeing on what genuine things are. And so yeah, just listen to that one more time. That's his standard, right? That's his standard.
Their side does it. They're like, oh, well. No, I did not support prosecuting Trump. Yes, once the standard was set that we could prosecute the candidate for president on the other side for any sort of garbage. Yes, I'm absolutely for our side doing that over and over and over.
I'm in favor of our side going after the enemies, right? Their side for garbage.
I think they should lock up hundreds of judges.
They should lock up hundreds of judges for what? For garbage, right?
Policy officials, anyone who tries to intervene.
And then he adds the policy point.
Any way whatsoever.
In any way whatsoever, right? So now he's adding the kind of substantive rationale. Well, if it's on all fours, substantive versus substantive, now you were just disagreeing on what's substantive, what's not substantive. But you said that there was a standard set of like negligent stuff, right? So look at what he's suggesting, right? And it's a really, really horrible sleight of hand that he's doing here. It's a sleight of hand. He's saying the standard has been set to do bad faith things. And so we should do bad faith things. But then he tries to caveat and say, well, if they try to obstruct in any way, well, are you saying that even if there weren't bad faith standards, you wouldn't be in favor of going after judges who like knowingly break the criminal law? You would be against that so long as Trump, there wasn't what you perceive to be a bad faith campaign against Trump? You would not go after judges who are doing clearly criminal things, assuming that they're clearly criminal, in the absence of what happened? So you see the kind of the fakeness, right? He's trying to present it as your side did it, so now we're doing it. But he's not going all the way. He's trying to, because he knows that that's untenable, because then he'll have to be forced to say something like, yeah, we should be bad faith and break the law and do immoral shit, which is what I construe the left to have done. But he's pricing in this like, oh, but when we do it, it's actually fair. But when you do it, it's fair to do whether or not the other side was being unfair in the first instance. It's okay to do fair things. Are you guys following what I'm saying? Let me know if you're following what I'm saying. It's very dishonest. You guys following? Okay.
To stop ICE from doing their job. I hope they all get the maximum sentence, and I hope that they are dog walked in handcuffs in videotapes for all of us to see, much like Democrats who supported locking up Trump supporters.
So he's trying to make a comparison into what he considers to be the illegitimate things that the Democrats did, and saying, well, what we're doing is the same. It's an analogy, and so he's a victim of that double standard.
Like supporters that supported CNN showing up to Roger Stone's house as they drug him out in his underwear at 4 a.m. that supported the raid of Mar-a-Lago. HN, you're a liar is what you are. HN says, okay, so you're a hypocrite and I'm not. Good to know. Can you show me one time you protesting Democrats and their lawfare?
And so now, when he says, or when he addresses when he's responding to someone who is accusing him of being a hypocrite, which he is, he goes after that person, right? He changes the subject to now talk about the random commentator who's just saying you're being a hypocrite, which he obviously is.
Against Trump. Any social media post you had, any comment that you made on
and so now he's talking about whether the person who commented is being a hypocrite, and he thinks that that's topical, but it's not topical.
My channel or anywhere else, anytime you said I refuse to vote for these people that are clearly using political lawfare, can you show me that at all? Yes, I know, like every other liar that's a lefty that I debate.
And so now he's attacking, he says, you're a liar, you're bad faith, you're a hack, you're this or that. And so he's unable to defend himself on that accusation. It actually makes him very, very uncomfortable when people bring that up, which is like, wait, you want a horrible double standard in your mind, right? Because in our mind, some of the stuff, like with the FISA warrant stuff, was bad, right? For sure. But we think that to the extent that it's bad, we don't want it repeated by our side or any other side, right? And his only response is that you're just lying, even though, as I've already laid out, that's garbage, bullshit, and literally unfalsifiable. How do I falsify whether or not I'm being honest about it? And how do you support the notion that I'm being deceitful about it? But when it's put to him, hey, would you support bad warrants against your enemies? He's like, I don't have to answer it. But offline, he'll say, of course I wouldn't be in support of it. I would be the first one against it. But here he's saying, actually, we do need to have bad faith standards, the same as Democrats, and apply them in the same exact way. So you can't have it both ways, Rob. You're a hypocrite.
You'll say after the fact, once your side reaps what it sows, you'll say, I was against that. I was the one Democrat that was actually against it. The whole time I was like, this is authoritarian that you're prosecuting Trump. I was saying that all the time.
Or we just disagree on the merits of the underlying thing.
Vita, thanks for the $5. Why are you home? Are we getting Rob full-time streamer? Also, I absolutely love DTG Wars. Episode 1, what a great idea. I'm home temporarily just for dinner, and then I have to go right back to work.
Wow, a Star Wars parody. No one has ever thought of that.
I didn't make any public comments. I just thought about it in my head. Yes, sure. Actually, when the entire Democrat platform was locking up Donald Trump, I didn't comment on it. I had other...
Yeah, he should be locked up, right? And if you think that it's unfair, why would you apply that standard towards judges unless you think, wait, what the judges are doing are substantively wrong. But if you think that what they're doing is substantively wrong, why wouldn't you go after them even if the Democrats didn't already do what you consider to be unfair? In which case you're just arguing about which is fair, which is not fair, which is substantively correct, and which is not. And then this whole double standard thing falls away.
Political thoughts going on. It just escaped my mind. I didn't comment on it, but I thought it was horrible and a horrible abuse of power. But now I'm thinking of when a judge gets arrested.
I don't agree with Noerr, don't get me wrong, but to steelman as much as possible. I think if you use the situation as a layman, if you punch me, I get to fight back, and we shouldn't be punching other people. But if one is punching me, I have to punch back. Okay, but then he's acknowledging that he's in favor of doing illegitimate things, right? Which he's not willing to do. If you push him, do you want to do illegal things and unethical things and things that are politically biased and things that the government shouldn't be doing that you wouldn't support them doing if it were Democrats? He'll say no. We have to rise above it. We have to be better. But he still wants to have that feeling of like we're victims, and we have to use their tactics against them. But if we do you understand what I'm saying? The other side we deny that all these cases against Trump are unfair or quote unquote lawfare. We think that they're based and justified on the law and facts. But he has to interpret that as they're doing illegitimate things, and we have to do the same thing they're doing. But also, I don't want that to happen because I'm above it, and so and so then he has this weird little line where, okay, to my audience, I'll give them my actual take, but to you, for the shit libs, for the people who supported all this corruption, I don't have to say shit to you. And so that's his only saving grace. It's a face-saving maneuver, but it's not actually addressing this hypocrisy.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care that the Democrats that were for locking up Trump are now furious that they think.
Yeah, whether you care, first of all, you obviously do care, but whether you care or not is not the issue. It's whether or not they're right about it. Whether you care or not, who cares whether you care or not in that sense? We care your opinion. Not whether you care about the feelings. What people are asking for your thoughts on it.
That it's beyond the pale to lock up a judge. Lock up more. I won't be satisfied. Lock up Nancy Pelosi. Lock up Joe Biden.
On what, right? On what? So now he's outright saying that do it based on the precedent set by the Democrats. So now he's openly advocating for going after political rivals based on garbage. His words, garbage.
All of them. That's the standard.
That's the standard based on the standard. The garbage standard, right? He is in favor of it. And he's saying it's not a hypothetical.
I'm tired of the standard being set.
Yep.
Democrats cheering that standard on. And then when the shoe's on the other foot, Democrats go, well, that's whataboutism to talk about the standard that we cheered for being set. That's whataboutism. That's whataboutism. Whoa, why can't we just focus on Trump?
Right, he's doing the same thing. You see that? You see that? So he is deploying the whataboutism in response, right? And when someone goes after him, he does the whataboutism. And then when he goes after Biden, he accuses other people of saying, well, what about Trump? So it's on all fours. There's parody on all fours. There's complete parody in terms of his accusations of Democrats as he sees them, right? And his conduct as it obviously is.
Trump and what he's doing is bad. They didn't have a problem with the Twitter files at all. They didn't care.
Right. We have a different opinion on the Twitter files. It's a nothing burger. We don't think that the Twitter files shows malfeasance on behalf of the government in terms of illegal activity of the government or even corrupt activity on behalf of the government. We have a different substantive opinion based on Twitter files, especially since a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in terms of Twitter files happened under Donald Trump's authority.
That USAID money was going to NGOs that are actually government organizations by a different name and pressuring social media companies to censor people they disagreed with, like conservatives. By the way, the NGOs are...
By the way, right? And so here's another situation. Trump is pressuring private actors, not even just through proxies, to censor students, to censor employees, to censor Americans, to censor non-citizens, and even to censor citizens using the official power of the state. So he is just as much a victim of, even if it were true, right, that there's necessary government action by NGOs or whatever the hell you want to say, it's complete garbage. But even assume that it's true, right? So I'm doing this assuming it's facts.
Still doing that in Europe. They're helping the European Union sue places like X for not complying with European Union laws to censor disinformation. And we all know what disinformation is. I've talked you through this many times. Disinformation is just information that the establishment doesn't like being out there. Whether or not it's truthful is irrelevant. There is disinformation, which is information that is incorrect. There is misinformation, which is information that you know is incorrect, but you're spreading, so you're lying. And then there is malinformation. Malinformation is information that's true, but it's just inconvenient to the people in power's narrative. So all of that needs to be censored. NGOs are a government organization. You are a conspiracy theorist. Yes, if a non-governmental organization ceases to exist without governmental funding, and it is directed by government institutions on the apparatuses and the methods that they're supposed to do and what their objectives should be, then I'll say that it's just a government organization by a different name. Yes.
So anyone who takes government money is a government organization. That's the standard for Rob. If you're a military contractor or any kind of actor that relies on government funding, you are part of the government. Do you think that's a good standard? You guys tell me if you think that's a good standard.
Her objective should be funding, and it is direct theories. Yes, if a non-governmental organization ceases to exist without governmental funding, and it is directed by government institutions.
If it's directed by government institutions, okay. If it's an alter ego of the government, sure, maybe you have a point there. But mere funding, I can't. That's not really what I take to be a good standard. And also think about the implications there on like Harvard and what Trump is trying to do. Trump is trying to direct what's going on with Harvard. So in a sense, he's trying to nationalize, under Rob's own standard, he's trying to nationalize Harvard. He's trying to make it public. He misdefined misinformation
on the apparatuses and the methods that they're supposed to do and what their objectives should be, then I'll say that it's just a government organization by a different name. Yes. So now locking up politicians is bad after that's what Democrats, remember, Democrats were running on Trump shouldn't be on the ballot. Trump.
Hell yeah. Stand by it.
He should be locked up.
Stand by it.
38-time felon. All the cases against Trump, they're all good. They
stand by it.
raided Mar-a-Lago. Yes, they said yes.
Yes, I agree with it because it's based because he's criminal.
People like me are saying, you sure that's a precedent you want to set?
And so look, that's the precedent standard, which he takes to be bad faith that he wants to now apply.
We're going to raid former presidents and the front runner for president next time. We're going to raid their home. That's the precedent we're going to set. You sure we want to set the precedent of sitting administration?
If they're criminal, right? If they do crimes, if they've done something criminal, right?
It's getting FISA warrants against their opponents.
There you go, right? So we don't agree that the FISA warrant process was correct with Carter Page. That's a situation in which we wouldn't want that standard to be applied on a foregoing basis. Find me the person who, with knowledge of the improprieties of the Carter Page FISA warrants, says that they were still like, it's still a good idea and we should follow the precedent of the Carter Page warrants.
You sure that's what you want to do? Yes, they said, yes, Trump bad, Orange Man bad, get him. And now the shoe's on the other foot and they're like, oh my God, the rule of law, no, they've locked up a judge. By the way, hardly any of them are saying that this judge didn't commit a crime.
So just to be clear on that, right? That should be what you should be arguing, is this is clearly criminal if you think that, right? And there are questions. There are deep questions. I'm one of the people who thinks, by the way, though, that judges obviously can commit crimes. And I need to do further research on the specific statutes at issue here before I comment on it. But I do think that there's potential for judges to criminally obstruct immigration law enforcement in ways that could be criminal. Yes, I do think that's possible. Whether these facts meet that out, that's different. But that's the case you should be advocating is this criminal? But that, if they did something criminal, right? If they actually obstructed, if a judge actually obstructed in a criminal way immigration law enforcement, you would be in favor of punishing it regardless of the Mar-a-Lago warrants, regardless of the Carter Page warrants. Those don't factor into whether or not you think that that should be punished. Just be honest about that. And so this whole double standard thing is garbage.
Obviously, she should have her day in court.
Oh, that's big of you.
But it looks as if it's pretty cut and dry for those that didn't follow.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry. Notice that, by the way. These indictments and affidavits, which are supposed to be written in a way most favorably to the prosecution, and he understands that with respect to the Trump situations, but he just says, let's wait for what Trump says. Let's wait for what Trump says. He's willing to wait for Trump's arguments and agree with all of them. But when it's someone he doesn't like, then he immediately... So he's beholden to the same biases and standards he accuses of others.
ICE shows up to pick up an illegal that's there on a trial for abuse, assaulting people. Witnesses are there, including his former girlfriend, to testify that he assaulted them. ICE shows up and says, hey, we're going to arrest this guy afterwards. Judge comes out, yells at them, then goes back in the courthouse and leads them out a side door that's not for public use in hopes of avoiding ICE. You can't arrest. Why not? I thought no one was above the law. If I conceal and help a fugitive flee a law enforcement group in this country, can I be charged with it? Yeah. Okay, then why not a judge?
All right, so then there's no double standard here.
Okay, HN says, you're using word for word the Trump administration's account of events. Let's hear your account. Go ahead, let's hear your
He's such a baby to everything. It's like, you do it. You talk about it. You do it. Right? It's actually not necessary for the person making that critique to have their own version of events, right? You would say, it's the only one we have available right now. I generally trust the administration. But he has to do the, what about you? What about you? What about you? It's all he has. Right? You guys get that. In order to answer this criticism, you don't actually need to respond to this person and undermine their credibility, but that's his instant reaction, is to undermine their character.
Can I be charged with it? Yeah. Okay, then why not a judge? Okay, HN says, you're using word for word the Trump administration's account of events. Let's hear your account.
Right? You see that?
Go ahead, let's hear your account. Because I haven't just heard it from, I've heard it from Jonathan Turley. I heard it from Eli Honing, who's CNN senior legal correspondent, who's a Democrat. He said, pretty cut and dry. Looks like a pretty cut and dry case.
And to be clear, that's not his criticism, right? His criticism is those facts might be inaccurate. And obviously, Eli Honig and Turley are relying on the affiant. What the criticism is you can't trust the facts of the Trump administration. Now, whether you can or can't, that's going to be up for debate. My guess is, there may be some other factual relevant evidence, but again, not addressing the criticism, which doesn't apply to the legal analysis, but the factual underpinnings. And you citing legal experts who are themselves relying on the affiant's declaration doesn't address that point. He's so angry and so mad and so on offense that he's not even addressing the criticism there. Do you guys see that? That one is about the facts, the other is like the legal analysis taking the facts as an assumption. And he feels really good about it. He feels really big about, bullying his chat in that way.
But that's just Trump's word of events. Let's hear HN's going to give us the other side of the argument.
Other side of the facts, right? Now, so what he's suggesting that maybe you should not assume those facts. And now he is saying that what would be fair is for this guy who just is providing one critique and who might be agnostic about this whole thing, right? You don't know.
I'm convinced HN's a plant. He's actually a Rob.
And again, attacking all the character of his audience as opposed to, now I do that too, but I also address their arguments.
A Trump supporter that pretends to be a lefty just so I can get good content.
I call them sheep.
It's good stuff.
All right, there's one other part I want to show you guys.
All of the Democrats' opinions on the illegal lawfare to go after Trump. Why do you think that's something I would bring up? Because the point I'm making is none of them care about this stuff.
Here we go.
What do you think Pisco's talking about 95% of the time when it comes to Trump?
Peace for Pisco.
HN says, but if David got deported, if ICE would have arrested them, how would this guy have ever faced justice for beating the crap out of his girlfriend? Well, why don't you ask the judge that helped him escape arrest? Why don't you ask her? Because I'm sure that girlfriend would feel great knowing, oh, now he's on the lam. Imagine that. You work up the courage to testify against your former boyfriend for beating you up. As you're sitting in court waiting to testify, the judge allows the man out a side door so that ICE doesn't arrest him, and now he's on the lam, capable of coming to your home and beating you up again, or worse. But don't arrest that judge. 2025 Gay Odyssey for $2 says, deport illegals in jail. We can't afford it. F you, chat. Yeah. Agreed.
Deport people in jail without due process. And he says, I agree.
I'm tired of pretending. I told Pisco, it's like, he asked me, he's like, how come every time I debate you, Robbie, you end up bringing up Russiagate and the lawfare against Trump? Well, why do you think? Why do you think when I debate Pisco, that's what ends up coming up? What do you think Pisco's talking about 95% of the time when it comes to Trump? What do you think he's talking about? Just take a guess. Is he saying, well, Trump had a blue suit on? Maybe he's saying that. Yeah, John Ruck gets it. That Trump's a criminal. He's engaged in some sort of criminal actions. Pisco's a lawyer. He wants to, Trump's violating due process. Trump's violating the First Amendment. Trump's a criminal. Trump did inappropriate things when he got a loan for his home. Trump tried to steal an election. He was a criminal in that way. So why do you think that me bringing up Pisco and all of the Democrats' opinions on the illegal lawfare to go after Trump, why do you think that's something I would bring up?
When you say illegal lawfare, if you mean all the things that I'm talking about here that I believe in 100%, yeah, you can bring it up and address why I'm wrong.
Because the point I'm making is...
But you don't do that. What you're talking about is Russiagate.
None of them care about this stuff. None of them.
And again, you're not... all you're doing is attacking my character.
He'll say afterwards, he'll say, yeah, I'm glad Kevin Kleinsmith got probation and lost his legal license for a year for manufacturing evidence to be able to spy on Trump's team.
So to be clear, who cut the deal with Kevin Kleinsmith? Does anyone know who cut the deal with Kevin Kleinsmith? Durham, not DeRude. Durham, the Justice Department that went after Kleinsmith. So to the extent, and what Rob will say is Durham was a plant, that Durham himself was just an op. But think about what you have to think to believe his theory on Kevin Kleinsmith. Why is Kevin Kleinsmith forced to get into this position at all to lie? You might actually not actually know the facts here, right? There was a special supervising agent who was assigned to be the affiant, the person who makes the declarations to the FISA court, where he was getting a lot of information from Kevin Kleinsmith, who had been on the Russian investigation, the Crossfire Hurricane, for a while. And so Kevin Kleinsmith is not an upper guy in the investigation, okay? He's lower level. He is a bit of a pencil pusher. He is like a foot soldier underneath other people who had control over the investigation and with whom the investigation was going to run no matter what. But he was overseeing some aspects, namely, the FISA warrants themselves. But he wasn't in control that the investigation itself was happening or these warrants were sought in the first place, right? So he's not like a major figure in terms of the operational decision overall on the direction of Crossfire Hurricane. This supervising agent who has to make the actual declarations to the FISA court, he's the one that's pushing Kevin Kleinsmith and says, because what happens is there are public statements from Carter Page saying, I actually gave information to the government before, I'm not a spy. And so the special supervising agent sees those statements and is like, wait, is there information? He's newer to the case, right? He goes to Kleinsmith and says, is there information? Was he ever a source for this other government organization, right? So in his mind, it's all a DOJ cover-up. But the entity, the person who is causing Kevin Kleinsmith to verify whether or not he's a member of another government organization in the first place is a member of the Justice Department, is the SSA, who is going to the FISA court. So what kind of conspiracy is this, actually? Who's the one doing the conspiracy at this point? The Department of Justice is, in essence, doing an internal compliance check on itself. Someone is pushing Kleinsmith. And when Kleinsmith comes back and says, we're good, there's an additional chat with the special supervising agent where the supervising agent is pushing, like, that's not what I heard. I'm just gonna verify that. And so there's, and pushes for Kleinsmith until Kleinsmith finally sends the doctored or shows him the doctored email, right? So who's behind it, right? The Department of Justice in this grand conspiracy, this grand narrative to go after Donald Trump is creating this weird perjury, weird, obstruction, false statement charge of itself. If it just wanted to cover it up, why wouldn't it just sweep it under the rug? Why reach out to the CIA at all? Why push for Kleinsmith at all to get confirmation with the CIA when the only person who's asking them to do that is the DOJ itself? So that's the context here, right? And the entity that cuts the deal with Kleinsmith is the DOJ itself. What was the DOJ asking for? He ended up getting probation, and he was fired, and he had some other penalties, right, associated with it. What was the DOJ asking for? 3 months, 3 to 6 months, jail time. That's it. Oh, that's a lot, right? To a normal person, that's a lot, right? Jail time. But Rob thinks he should be executed for treason. Rob thinks he should be killed. And so what is this distinction between the probation and what the government was asking for, which was 3 to 6 months, which Rob would still consider a slap on the wrist? And so this whole thing is a complete manipulation by Rob, who is trying to create a narrative that the DOJ was out to get Trump, but fails to include key facts that show the DOJ's own insistence that Kevin Kleinsmith actually do the check itself in the first place to the CIA, and the DOJ's insistence that Kleinsmith actually see prison time. So he's unable to keep his story straight because he also thinks Durham is a plant. And so it doesn't make sense. None of it makes any sense. The more plausible story is Kleinsmith was, in fact, scared that they were going to have to write this embarrassing footnote, which could make him look bad. What the judge credits is, or they make the department look bad. What the judge credits is he actually believed that he was like a subsource of a source. Regardless of what you believe, it is not this narrative that the DOJ is out to get Trump. Forgetting, of course, in the first instance, that what we're talking about here is Carter Page, not Trump. Carter Page, the water boy, the person who's different than Trump. Like, if there's a warrant against a Democratic official based on something like factual, we want them to go after them, right? That doesn't mean we're in favor of improper warrants or criminal acts attendant to warrants. And at no point do we think that's a standard that we should use going forward. In fact, the whole point is to make sure it doesn't go forward that way. Rob's whole thing is that he wants the DOJ to be in check. And so why would he be in favor of perpetuating a standard that gives ultimate discretion to these same institutions that he claims that he doesn't trust? Why would he say, now we use the standard? In what way is that draining the swamp?
I'm glad. Yeah, that's a bad thing. Yep. Don't say about the illegal voices spying on Trump's team. Yeah, it was regrettable. He says that now, not when it was occurring.
Not when it was occurring. So what do you mean by that, actually, Rob? And we'll end with this. He says, I'm Johnny come lately. That really, I only do this after the fact because it's convenient. When I couldn't call out in real time the FISA warrant process as it was happening because it's a secret process that we didn't know about. When the report came out, I did a debate with you on the Russia story and the report and the debate. Prior to that debate, I wasn't as much of a public person. I'm being honest. So I didn't really have public debates at all, even if it were something I could have a debate about. And so really think about the impossible standard that Rob is trying to impose on me, right? I start doing content in terms of going on debates right around COVID, March, April 2020. Okay. When does the Horowitz report come out? Let's look at that. So the Horowitz report comes out December 2019. Okay. In what sense am I hiding the ball? Am I ignoring it that he's able to perceive when the report comes out December 2019? I start doing content in 2020, like in that springtime around COVID, and he and I are having a debate about it before the election of Joe Biden. It's the first debate I've ever done with Rob, was about this. But in Rob's mind, he's constructed a narrative, a completely stupid narrative by a completely stupid person, right? This is a stupid person, a dumb person. A stupid, dumb person has constructed a narrative that I was Johnny come lately, that I was unwilling to talk about it, quote, as it happened, as though that were possible before the release of the report that determined the problems. How could I comment on improper FISA warrant procedures at the time the FISA warrants were fucking executed, dipshit? This is what I mean when I say Rob is this overrated dumb guy. He doesn't actually think through his things. Like, if you just, and look at how it destroyed him in our debate. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Everything is like this. When you just take a little slice of it, the analysis of it, everything completely falls apart. And that comes even on the topics he wants to discuss. The topics he likes to discuss, like Kevin Kleinsmith, like all the Russiagate stuff. The truth is, he feels more comfortable on those grounds, even though I crush him. Every single time we have these debates, I crush him every single time. I make all the proper concessions that I actually believe, right? I actually believe when I say, yeah, I don't want the government abusing warrants. I'm a defense attorney. I don't want them doing that. My bias is always towards rights. He has no reason to think that it's not towards rights. I'll defend warrants I believe are based in truth and based in the evidence and based in law. But he can't prove that, I've always cared about rights, individual rights. I've been consistent on it. It's where we disagree. For example, on Twitter files, where there was no rights deprivation at all, or on some of the substantive Trump cases, he tries to smear me and say, I don't really care about these rights, based on shit tier analysis that is easy to break apart in 2 seconds, like I just did. So he will continue to bring up my character and the Russiagate matters because he knows that is the only way that he can interact in these debates, is to throw some mud around, to put out some distractions, which, by the way, I crush him on every single time, destroy him every single time. But it avoids him having to say, even though he does say in these little snippets, as I cut out in our debate, what Trump is doing is corrupt. Trump is actually doing bad things all the time. Trump is actually not being effective. So that's it. We'll cut this up. We'll do this analysis. We'll put it on the YouTube. We'll go in between the high school things. But yeah, no, thank you guys for listening and watching me as I reviewed this. Good to hear that Polyev is looking like he's about to lose his seat, but I appreciate it. I know it's late for you guys. Thank you guys for being loyal. More announcements coming up. I know like the stuff's coming out of big announcements coming. So just hold tight. I'm just telling you, hold tight. Pisco Nation, Peace Corps, your patience, your support will be rewarded in the days and weeks to come. Appreciate you. Stay cool.